to be able to have a lunch like that more frequently. Maybe not every day, but maybe more frequently. All right. We do the things we do for the reasons that we do them, that perhaps they're not quite understandable to everybody. And you must pardon me a little bit here, because I'm going to go a bit fast as I clear up this amazingly complicated and fascinating and important information. But due to the fact that we're going to be doing some analysis and interpretation shortly here, I'm going to ask you to ponder these things perhaps at more leisure yourselves. So what is the behavior? Am I going backwards? I think I am. We're about roughly here. So, sorry. So important for us to have a sense of why a child is doing the things they're doing. And we have to have some understanding. And during lunch I had some wonderful conversations. And there are so many variables. The child's own characteristics among them, including, an adolescent who is 18 years of age and has an intellectual disability. You must know that there is a huge contribution here of one's cognitive functioning to the kinds of things you're going to be observing and measuring. Okay? So your hypothesis, this child is doing this because, and you have this and that and this and that and this and that possibility of why they're doing it. And this, by the way, you're engaging in this effort because you want to find an intervention that's right for the child. Because two 18-year-olds doing the same behavior will need different interventions. They might be doing the exact same thing, but you will not use the same intervention for the two children. And I don't need to spend a long time on that, I'm sure. So, Susan tears her papers. Don't you love it? Haven't you seen it? It's going to be put in a ball and tossed. There's a very big communication here. And why is it? Well, in this case, you have learned sufficient that you know she's tearing her papers because she's got 20% of these things she's able to do. The rest of it is out of her league completely. So, develop an effective intervention based on the hypothesis, based on having looked at the environment, based on really understanding the behavior. So that's backwards. Forward, describe the behavior, learn about the environment, come up with some kind of an understanding of the function, and then here we are. Develop an effective data-based intervention. Clear hypothesis. I think she tears her papers because. I think he does this and this and this because, then you lead to effective interventions. And we do know for sure that two children with the same thing going on will not necessarily be helped by the same thing. Just as concrete as, a doctor doesn't do the same thing. Maybe I have a pain in some place or other, and one person may have the same pain, but if you go deeper, it's not from the same, source. And you do a different intervention for one than you might for another one. So, effective interventions are connected to your data and connected to function statements and so on like that explain why it's going on. Now, clearly you're going to use great interventions, right? So we go through our 5 steps. Okay, our behavioral description, looking around us at the environment, coming up with an understanding of the function, coming up with a hypothesis, and a great intervention. Do you stop right there? No. Now we're going to be doing really fine evaluation as well. So we're going to be asking, is Susan helped by this? is this change? You cannot answer that question unless you're taking data. So you're going to be watching to see, is there a change in the behavior? Is this working? So now you're taking event recording, you're taking duration recording, you're taking some kind of data to say, yes, it's helping, or no, it is not helping. Do I need to adjust my timeline? Do I need to adjust my plan in any way? Do I need to make additional adjustments? In the case of the young man we were describing at break time, it's possible that it won't be enough to check him every period. He may have to break up the class period into half and then let him out again until he gets more conscious of the need for intervention, and the need for him to take care of himself more appropriately. So do I need to make adjustments in any way to the desk situation, Is the context okay? Is the desk all right? Is there any other thing at all around me that I need? A huge and crucial step. And by the way, it starts over again then. It's a cyclical kind of thing again, because you will be conducting functional assessment and analysis for all kinds of reasons. And even sometimes you can get it down, and sometimes you have to go back and start over again, So you're getting to know the child and all kinds of things, and you're obviously going through that big, long, wonderful cycle of those 6 steps. So when you are completing those forms, each and every single one of those little squares that you're filling out, those little blocks, that you're filling out, is supposed to be informing the next one. And it's all supposed to crescendo into this wonderful solution that really addresses the problem behavior, right? So that's what you're doing when you're conducting the functional assessment. So thus, we get to know the child. And by the way, that reinforcer survey, I mention it to you again because it's really important to do things that are positive as much as you possibly can. When you're working with the children and adolescents that you'll be working with, try your best to get to know what they like, what do they value, and that'll help guide your reinforcement selection, your reinforcer selection. Whether it is that they want to be your helper, you can be teacher's helper if they want that kind of positive attention, or if they are peer buddy, you can be with your peer buddy. There are all kinds of ways to reinforce children. And I gave you a reinforcer survey, and you can add to it. You can make ones for little children. You can give them pictures, have them circle the 3 things they like most on this page. And, there might be a picture of a dog and a book and a pizza, and you'll see which of them. And you'll be surprised. Maybe they will circle the little dog, and then you'll know little stickers that have anything to address maybe little paw prints and things. All that sort of creative work can do a great deal to help get to know the child and their skills. Yes. Do you want to say something? And there's a beautiful big glass, big water jug, and so wonderful. You are. We get to know the child and their preferences, their skills, their needs, and all of those things. And we get to know the environment, all the different 3 big ones, and maybe you can add more to the environment. Get to know what needs to be known about this child's vision, hearing, get to know. And data, all along the way. You can't do any of this without generating data. Variety of sources like the ones we discussed plus what I gave you, and then we plan, we implement, and we evaluate all that wonderful, wonderful cyclical work that we do. And then for those that we want to be up closer to and really follow, we are going to be doing this work of functional behavioral assessment. So here we are, we're about to think of a whole. Does anybody in here feel like I have so much information in my classroom or in my office, and I really haven't had enough done with it? That I don't do enough with it? Do you feel like that? Anybody? You do a little bit? Does anybody feel like, I think I have a lot more information than I give myself credit for? Isn't that true? So much information. And over there, by the way, I have a file. Susan's file is over there if you want to take a little look at it here shortly. And by the way, Sherry, we'll continue now until 2:30 straight, right? Very nice, thank you. So we're going to pay attention to the data. We're not going to let it sit on our shelves gathering dust. Is that fair? to do? No, no, no. As much as we possibly can, we're going to be using the information. And then we're going to be summarizing. Maybe there are some things you have to throw away after a while, don't you think? You know, all those work products, how many of them are you going to keep? So how do you keep really relevant things? And then how do you what needs to be written down on them to make them be meaningful and worthy of being in that file? You know, those kinds of things. And listening to what data from a variety of sources are telling us. So analyzing all the data that you have and interpreting it to make database decisions. So that's the kind of thing we'll spend some time on here as we proceed. What are we doing? When we're interpreting data, I love it that we have an interpreter right here. What are we doing? We are communicating what the data mean. What is our interpreter doing? Our interpreter is saying what is being said in a different way, right? So what we are doing is we're explaining the meaning of why is this child, you know, who is this child? We have data to say, now this is what it means. So that's what you're doing when you're taking your data, you're interpreting it, and you're analyzing it to make database decisions, right? So you're trying to communicate understanding of it, right? Okay? So we are making careful conclusions about the kinds of things we say. We are making observations about the child, and we are putting numbers or words that back up what we're saying. You know? So we are making conclusions in a very, very data-based manner. And the whole notion of multidisciplinary is an enrichment for us. We can trust that what we're saying is true when we gather around the table with our colleagues, and our colleagues are indeed saying the same kinds of things, or they are guiding our thinking in the same direction. So therefore we have what we might more technically refer to as inter-rater reliability, or we have external validity, or those kinds of terms. So multidisciplinary approach, in that way we're getting a more holistic picture. And you know, there's another thing to keep in mind as well, and that is the more data points you have, like not just 1 day or 2 days, minimum it should be 3 days of data. That's not even anything like enough. But you can't really make any decisions about how troublesome any particular skill area might be unless you have 3 days of data. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You have 3 days of observations that I observed this child 3 different days, and this is what I have. That's kind of like baseline data. And then 3 days of intervention data too, to say he's really improving. You've seen it 1 day, you've seen it another day, and you've seen it another day. So the notion of 3 data points, or even a variety of sources, that kind of thing. You know, the more places you can see it, and the more frequently and the more data you have accumulated, the better it is. So those kinds of things that we need to. What are obstacles to data analysis and interpretation? Maybe that's a good place to start here as we launch into this thing. Do you all find it easy to do? Can you write down one thing that you'd say, I saw you say, no, it's not easy to do. Jot it down. Tell me, write one note on your paper and then bend over to the neighbor and see what that person wrote. Just for a real brief, what makes this hard? Things you wrote down on first cut on this one. Why is this hard? sometimes. What other kinds of obstacles are there? And now, why might data be sitting around on our shelves too often?
I was going to say sometimes I work in a middle school and we might get goals from a different teacher or a different school, and you get the goal and you're like, what is this? So it's hard for you to collect data on someone else's goal when you know that may not work as best in your classroom or whatever.
Yeah, the whole notion of communication across colleagues, across schools. Other things you wrote down real quick? Yes.
Especially for the initial data, sometimes you just can like a bunch of numbers.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to analyze, you don't know what it's telling you. And then you often go and create different data. And then now you have two sets of data and it's still the same situation. That's what we feel. Like you take all this time to plan and like how are they going to do it while we're teaching, and then you get it and you're like, okay, so what does it tell you? That's how we feel.
Yes, I'm sure, and I'm sure everybody in here could kind of say exactly, like there's obviously communication issues, but also technical knowledge, like just knowing how to go about this in a simple manner that's efficient, because you don't have time. You're busy, So I would say to you, try to come up with a way that makes it simple and easy. And I would hope today, maybe indeed, as I go through this, you might grab on to a place to start making your data maybe more meaningful, and possibly even appreciate all that you do have, rather than have to go out generating new, and then when you do go out generating new, that you're going to be efficient about it and really focused and clear on what it is that you're trying to generate. Okay? Any other thoughts about why the obstacles and the challenges of it all? Okay, data analysis and interpretation. What would you add on to this?
Time.
Would you add that? Takes time. It does. It takes time, and I think one way to kind of reduce how much time it takes would be if you could possibly be more efficient. Then it wouldn't take as long. Like the more efficient we can be about it, maybe the less time it takes. You know how long it takes to do something that we don't know quite what we're doing? It's we take longer to do things that we're not comfortable with. But if you are comfortable with it, maybe you can be much quicker. Portfolios are a wonderful data source, and you could do them very easily and put them into your day. Pick the best work of a week and put that in a portfolio. And the best work in math for this week, the best work in language arts or writing or reading or whatever it is, the best work, and make a portfolio, and maybe pick then the best of the 4 from that week for September. Pick the best work out of September and the best work out of October, and you could see the child's progress by the year end. So portfolios are a great data source. They're simple. You could put them into your day. So the quicker and the more efficient, the less time that your data gather process, would take. So that's the thought. And by the way, I could clearly spend a long time talking about these wonderful articles. I trust that you have a copy of them. The case study here is a wonderful example of a complicated child who was deaf and also had many sensory things going on, and then the whole process that's used, not just the results, but taking data and then documenting the behavior change. It's a very helpful little article, and it's rather unique as well. There are not too many like that at all published in the Annals of the Deaf or any other place. So it's wonderful to see more of that coming out. And then the other pile of information you have regarding the dual diagnosis and the child with learning disability and so on. So very nice resource, and I trust that they will be helpful to you as you go on here. So as we proceed now, we're going to aggregate data for all the reasons that we know to be doing this kind of work. Aggregating data for what? Data for program decision making, and what are all the different pieces of the puzzle that we might be talking about. Aggregating data to, and all different kinds of data, both qualitative and quantitative, as we'll be seeing. So we have lots of good reasons to be doing this. Now, what are you going to do to What data source are you going to use? Well, you know what? I think I'm going to interview that family. Good. I can learn a great deal about this little child if I could ever sit down and find a duration. And then you could even read a whole book on how to conduct an interview. Can you believe that? You can, can't you? You've seen a whole book written about interviewing and how to do interviewing well. I would come to an interview with 3 or 4 questions that really, really you want answered, and then ask them in an open-ended way, which invites elaboration. And that whole, can you tell me more about, is another really good skill to use in an interview context. But Jim Spradley is somebody who has written a great book on how to interview well and how to get really, not yes, no questions. Don't ask, does he have this problem at home? Yes or no? That's not the way to get information. Can you tell me about how his routine at night? Can you tell me about his routine in the evening? That's open-ended, that's asking. And then once you get more information, can you tell me more about that part of it? But does he have a night routine? Yes or no? You're going to get yes or no. Whereas, can you describe his routine in the evening? That's a lot different. Or can you tell me about his hobbies? Rather than does he have hobbies? That's going to close it right away. So there are ways to get really good information from interviews. There are ways, obviously, to get really good information from your classroom observation. There are ways to look at your work products and maximize their potential. And there are ways to do probes and many, 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 many other data sources. And you and I just simply have to be thinking about what is it that we want to find out about, right? So rationale for analyzing and interpreting. Good reasons all over the place. We want to understand this child's skills, so you're going to analyze and interpret data because you want to find out the child's, where they are in varied aspects here. So, and clearly to be accountable is not at all the least one, So there are plenty good reasons for our analysis and interpretation. So as we pay attention, we can pay attention to numbers, and they sound daunting at times, don't they? You see all these numbers and you say, oh my goodness gracious, I wish I knew what those things mean. If a school psychologist, maybe that's a very nice idea. Sit down with a school psychologist. Sit down with somebody who can interpret those very obtuse numbers from a Woodcock-Johnson or from some other such assessment, so the tool that might have been used. So the quantitative kinds of things that are really confusing. The same is true then of qualitative kinds of things. And I have data here that show the difference is fascinating. When you look at quantitative data, believe it or not, this is quantitative data. This is the basis for quantitative data for a teacher, and this is the basis for qualitative data for a teacher. And I will pass around just a little pile of these papers, just to, we'll critique them now in a minute. I'm going to ask you, what do you see when you look at that page? This is a real child, by the way. And I want to ask you, how would you interpret what you're looking at quantitatively as you look at that page? And there are helpful and unhelpful kinds of things that you can put on that can be put on paper. I have a more quantitative information here that you can, quantitative information is information you can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What does it tell you? And what would help you make more sense of this? What if this information were provided to me? How would it be more helpful to me? So as you look at this, what does it say to you? And if it doesn't say anything to you, there might be a really good reason why it doesn't say anything to you. Anybody else needs this one? This is the little quantitative one. And then I have another example up here now too, but I'm not sure. Does this add a little more clarity? Or this is the same child, by the way. Does this add anything else? It'd be interesting to look at this. And what would help you if you were to find all that quantitative information speaking to you? Is this adequate? Does it tell you? What does it tell you? And then even what questions do you have after? It's fine for you to have questions, as you look at some quantitative information and you say, listen, I'm unclear about this and I'm unclear about that, and it's fine to ask that question of the teacher. Listen, I looked at the work. Can you help me understand if the thing doesn't speak to you? Actually, in the best case scenario, it would speak to you, and it would be meaningful. But now, though, what's going to help this to be meaningful is my question to you, and we'll get to ways to make this speak more clearly. So analysis and interpretation of what I just gave you, and then analysis and interpretation of more work over here that we might consider qualitative. And we might as well, in the process of passing these things out, you might keep your little qualitatives and your little quantitatives kind of separately so that we can kind of see that they really are different. When you're numbers based, when you're words based, are you numbers based or words based in your analysis and interpretation? They're really different, and they're whole studies all by themselves. Analysis and interpretation that is word based, you're looking for different things than what you would be looking for if you were numerically based. Okay? And both are entirely legitimate data sources, by the way. And these are informal data sources here. Now, we're not talking about interpreting formal instruments here at all, but data on an ongoing basis in a classroom environment is what we're talking about. Okay? So, as we delve into this, we want our documents to make sense, don't we? We want all of what we've accumulated to make sense, and we want them to speak to people. Explaining the meaning of. Do you remember? A picture is worth 1,000 words, we're told. Connecting the dots is more than just something that people do when they're, learning how to count or something. Graphs communicate. The same set of data can be graphed more than one way. I would like to spend just a little second here on the qualitative one before I move into the quantitative ones. This here, analysis of qualitative information. If you look at your sheet that is, word-based, what kinds of things do you note? For example, there are two of them. One of them that is long and one that is short. My question to you is, what are the themes that you're noting? Are there themes? Because the way you look at a verbal description is a lot different from the way you will be looking at a quantitative description. So what ways do the themes cluster conceptually? Like, can you say something you notice about Susan as you read these two little qualitative pieces of information? Just say things that you learned from reading that, because it's qualitative data. What kinds of themes are you noting? Do you want to spend a minute on that together, or do you want to just kind of share all together here real quickly? What kinds of themes do you notice from those two pieces of information?
The parent letter seems much more informal, and it has a lot more, it looks like the therapist is trying to be really positive and kind of emotionally touch the parent, whereas the behavior plan one just seems pretty much straight to the book, more professional, more formal, stating the facts, not adding that fluff that I feel like the parent letter has.
Themes. What kinds of themes are there? What information? There are different writing styles is kind of what I'm noting from you. And it's true that qualitative data can look really different, both formal and informal. It's all word-based. What themes? From the parent letter, do you notice any particular themes there? Do you see that, do you see any evidence? What's the evidence telling us? The evidence tells us what?
Well, the therapist letter is about what they're working on through the language, and in the behavior plan, it states like during sessions the interpreter is going to try to engage his communication. So that would be one thing they're working on. So if you would have both of these letters, maybe you could work on the same phrases, switches of content in another setting.
Other thoughts on things that, that thematically seem to be obvious from these papers? Or what would you need maybe to help them be more meaningful? Maybe that's a whole other thing. That as they stand, I want so much to know what. If that were to really be meaningful for me, I would have this. What else needs to be on that paper so you know?
Where did they start? Well, the parent communication letter, or did she start with her saying one-word phrases or no words or?
Yeah. The child is improving. The child is much better. We don't know where they started. Wouldn't what we will call a legend, the word legend, if the teacher could keep that letter in the child's file and add to it a simple thing, which I will offer to you, is a legend. And on a legend, I'm sure now it's on one of the slides as we go forward, because legends will help us interpret and analyze data. So without a legend, it's kind of like traveling around the state of Illinois without a legend on your state map. Do you understand me? If it's a blue highway, it's a red highway, it's, a legend. There is one here on your notes in about slide 40 something. A legend. What day, month, year are we talking about? Don't you want to know if it's August or September or August or April or what? Wouldn't you want to know what time, a legend? So I would like to tell you that, or share with you, or even recommend to you, that whenever you're keeping anything from a child's work, write down as many of these as you can on your paper. Write the date. It's unbelievably important. Even what year. On one of your pieces of data, it says 2/21, does it? And we do not know if it's 2003, 2004, 2005. You do not know when it occurred. And those of us who have been around this world a while, the years run into each other, don't they? And if it was 2 years ago or 5 years ago, we need it written down, because otherwise it's like 2 or 5, it's all the same to us almost, doesn't it? So, we want to know what day, what month, what year. We want to know the child's name. Obviously, I have to do some blocking out here for confidentiality purposes. Then, the setting, the home environment, the school environment, what classroom, and then the observer's name, your own name goes on there, because it was your math class or your language arts class or something like that. So the targeted behaviors that are being looked at, what is it that is being focused on? What target behavior is being focused on, and then what observation methods. In these cases, we're talking anecdotal records. They are simply language-based word gatherings, and you're looking for thematic analyses. And to make your interpretation and analysis much easier, if you have information like I just told you, to provide context. Because if you don't have context, it's not as meaningful. All right? So as you look at that, you could make many observations, but of course we need to have help with making sense of it. And a legend will go a long way in helping us anchor what we're looking at. Now, as we continue here, we are going to be looking at the other data that I provided for you, and we're going to be thinking about how we can represent it in a picture format, as in a graph. So we'll be talking about graphic displays, but as we launch into that, we will also very much become very much aware and conscious of the importance of attaching a legend to everything. Wouldn't it be great if we got those stamp things that you just put stamp and then just fill it in? Like if you could get a stamp with a legend made on your stamp, it would make your information so much more meaningful. You know, like a little stamper that would, and you just fill it out real fast. So a child did a spelling test and got maybe 9 out of 10 correct, and that was quite a milestone. You're going to keep it. And you had your little stamp to fill it out the day fast, and there you go. You have a really nice piece of evidence of the child's learning, and a lot more meaningful and something that you can pass on, and when, even years down the road, 1 year and 2 years and 3 years, go back into that file. What was the child doing when he was 6 and 7 and 9 and 12 and 15, right? So a legend will provide essential context for data interpretation and analysis. Now, let me show you here an example. Oops, excuse me. Technology here. Okay, sorry. What I was wanting to share with you here now is. Cannot open that one. Okay. Let me show you. I wonder what the problem is here. I do have a. If I can go in here into my Excel file that I've opened already. Can you see that? Yeah. Now, this, by the way, if you accumulated a list of information and put it into Excel, and simply, I could take you through the steps of opening a blank page in Excel, entering these, and again now, you know, your comment about the technicalities of doing this, it's kind of daunting to think about trying to do it without having been somehow exposed to the use of Excel. But all I can share with you is when you go in, open up Excel, there's like a blank worksheet. And all you do is put in the date in the first column, and try this, you know, because obviously it is in your Microsoft Office collection. Put in your data here. Simply highlight this and go over here to your insert feature and go over here to your line. That's all it is. And in that way, you can show the child's outcomes of, you know, whatever spelling or math or whatever it might be over time. Furthermore, here as it stands, you can obviously import that then into any other document you'll be working on. But let me show you one that is the child we were talking about, okay, now, earlier today. And that does not speak very much to you at the moment. Isn't that true? What is it missing? It's totally missing a legend. Let me show you. As it stands, it's not very meaningful. But then, if you were to make it more meaningful, we can do something like this with it. All you do is insert a little text box. You know? And so you've got your baseline data, the child's, what did the child look like when you started taking data on this child, and then, draw a line. By the way, this is nothing other than inserting inserting a line. So you'd insert a line here to draw what we call a phase line to. Then here's a text box for the baseline and intervention, and then you can show the growth of the child over time. So symbol is what you would get, is what you'd use to draw the line there to show before intervention and after intervention. And I will tell you, you and I know when you looking at that data as a bunch of numbers and looking at it as a graphic display makes such a difference, doesn't it? You know, you can see that there's a change here much more obviously than when you saw the little box with numbers in it. So keep in mind, if you can possibly convert something to a graphic display, there's nothing sacred either about line graphs. If you want to use, bar graphs, or if you want to use pies or something like that, there's nothing at all to keep you from doing that. Would you like to just tell me a few obstacles to doing this? Are there any? Or is this all a piece of cake and nobody has any trouble doing it? Time. Okay? An obvious obstacle. There's never enough time in a day to do all the things we need to do. And you know what I think about some of us? Even if you sliced off one piece of our lives, you still wouldn't have enough time. Not alone that there are actually 2 or 3 other big pieces in our lives, but if you slice off one, we haven't enough time to do all that. Enough time to do, and there's this piece and that piece. So time, we'll have to be extraordinarily efficient and really organized so we can do anything like the kind of work we want to be doing. What else?
Along with the time, there's more than one student in your class, and they probably have different issues. It's not like you're always focusing on the same behavior for each student, so then the time factor going not only for one student, but for multiple students with multiple issues.
Yeah. So there are multiple students, multiple issues, and time is finite, Then I would say, come up with a system. Like I would say, you're not going to be documenting and graphing everything. You're only going to be documenting graphing the kinds of things that you really feel would be worthwhile. What contribution to this meeting would really be significant? So then you will pick and choose and graphically display. You'll bring in your collection of data, whatever, on all kinds of things, and then show the significant developments in your graphic display. So, yes, Sherry?
I just wanted to remind everybody that on the isrc.us webpage, if you go to our downloads page, we have a template, a graphing template in Excel that you could just open up and enter in your data, and it will graph it for you.
Yeah, it's beautiful. The website is amazing. It has so many resources. So, trying to get guidelines on what it is that you think indeed you're going to be doing, because you can't do everything, is what your point is, I think. Is it, there's everything, it's also complicated. Okay, now, so, and your website is a great resource, right? Any other comments about how wonderful it is to look at this versus to look at just a jumble of numerical representations? You can imagine this. Tell me the kinds of behaviors you can imagine graphing like that. Tell me the kinds of things. Obviously, in this case, there's time sampling used to show that she's on task. Is what's on here. She's talk out. She's talking out lots less is the message of this. And we're so glad she's talking out a lot of the time. In a 50-minute period, she was doing all this talk out. Now she's really lessening that. Can you tell me other, what we might call dependent variables? What other things might you observe and measure on here and you'd love to see a graph of?
Comparing to the peers.
You'd like to, pick a typical peer. That would be fun to see. A typical peer at baseline looked like this, and a typical peer, and you know what you might find? They might not be that different. That would be some fun to find out, wouldn't it?
Maybe days of the week where there's that peak, is that after a long weekend or something?
What are the days of the week that we see the highest? Yeah. Is there any logic to those higher ones? Yeah. Other dependent variables you could see here. Talkouts on this one. What else could you see? Can't you imagine spelling accurately? You know, and obviously the line would go the other way. You'd like to see the line being increasing if it was spelling accuracy out of 10 spelling words, you know. Give me other examples. Yeah. Off-task behavior. You want to see that lessening as well. And you divide out the little 50-minute period into 5-minute intervals. And you'd put in a plus when you see her on task, on task, on task. You know, or you could do duration recording, and you could say for the first 7 minutes, and then you could do a total duration on task behavior at baseline, and then when you put a wonderful intervention in place, like the child is going to be reinforced with whatever, and you find that she's going to be doing much more lengthy durations of being on task. So that's exactly what could be on here. You know, academic and social. In this case, it's kind of talk outs, kind of social behavior, you know, student behavior in a classroom is what we'd be documenting. Academic tasks as in spelling accuracy, math accuracy, even legibility and handwriting, you know, any imaginable thing that, tell me other things you could imagine being observed and measured and documented in a graphic manner. Would you like to throw one into us? I didn't hear your voice at all today. You can imagine, you know, observing and measuring any imaginable thing. What kinds of things might you want to see from the students you're working with at the moment, perhaps?
The behaviors for sensory input.
Such as? Like?
Getting up, rocking.
Yeah. Even duration recording on how frequently that is going on. How many times did the little child leave his seat? And maybe the child actually needs to leave his seat, so do it in a more planful and more organized manner, rather than a kind of random manner. Maybe make time in the schedule for that sensory break that the child needs, right? Those kinds of issues. So that I want to offer you easy. And again, Sherry is telling us that on the website you could enter your data, and Excel will guide you through the process. And don't see it as difficult at all, is what I would like to offer to you. And hopefully you would find it as quite manageable. By itself, you will not want to do this, right? You can see how meaningless this is, don't you? You need those little text boxes telling you that this is baseline, this is intervention, this is the behavior that you're working on, and you want your legend. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything to look at something like that. Is that fine? You know, you really want to add on your little pieces of text to help with making your data meaningful. All right. So from here now, we are going to go to other data sources, and we are going to be talking about quantitative methods, you know, and, oh, am I going backwards? I am, I think, yes, sorry. Permanent products, you have it on a daily basis. You know, even those, anything at all that exists in your classroom, like a spelling, you know, anything at all that the child writes on, that could be kept and documented and put a legend on it if you want to keep it as a source, as a data source. All those direct observations are all numerically based. How long, how many times, you know, all of that sort of thing, versus word-based, you know. So then when we talk about qualitative kinds of things, that's when you will write words for your anecdotal. Do you need a little help with anything? Are you fine? Okay. So anecdotal records, and then permanent products, qualitative, interviews, letters, essays, all those kinds of things. Let me just share with you that when you're making an anecdotal record, which is like, maybe everybody thinks in here as an anecdotal record as an incident report. Didn't you all, you know, often make incident reports? They're obviously anecdotal records. But you can make an anecdotal record of a child's approach to a task, or, you know, your reflection on the kind of day the child had as an anecdotal record. Describe the setting and describe the actual things that went on. You don't want to have any conjecture in here. You want fact. Whenever you make an incident kind of report, you have facts in there. And what exactly was said, what exactly was done. So that is the quality anecdotal records will have very clear information that is as factually connected as humanly possible. And then also put a legend with all of those kinds of things. Include the date and the time and the place and everything else. Event recording, all of this is simply counting things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on that day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on that day. That kind of thing. It's incidents. It's discrete events that happen. At the beginning, they have a beginning, middle, and end. He raised his hand. He didn't, that's what you're counting when you're doing event recording. And then this is the kind of data sheet. I would hope, Sherry, that maybe there are things like that on the website as well, like, where there might be a data sheet, or data sheets for very...
We gave everyone clipboards with one imprinted on it.
Yes. And again, you have to be really flexible because they are not always going to be useful for all different environments and different situations. I would want to add on to that little legend here where, not just those 3 things, but also throw in the date and throw in the set, throw in as much information as you possibly can in the legend, Okay, monitoring progress and documenting improvement. Why are we doing all this event recording and anecdotal records? And we want to find out, is the child making progress? And are we doing the kinds of things that we need to be doing? So we are looking at our information and we are trying to make decisions based on data. And we're observing and measuring. We are doing our best to keep ongoing information, and then time sampling, a whole other approach to direct observation. You take a little block of time and again make it easy, because otherwise you won't be doing it, because your life is too complicated if it isn't easy. So make it simple. Maybe take only 15 minutes. There's this particular 15 minutes that I want to observe her. Not all day long. You can't observe her from early morning till afternoon. You just take 15 minutes out of the day that's really significant, and then block out that 15 into maybe 5-minute little intervals. And then at the end of each of those little intervals, make your little entry, whether it was plus or minus. And a plus would obviously mean that you might have seen what it is that you want to see, and then a minus would be it didn't happen. An example of that is a teacher may observe a child who walks around the classroom during 3 10-minute intervals. You could take 3 10-minute or 3 5-minute. So you'd simply see how much of the time, how much of that 15 minutes, how many intervals did you notice the child walking around. Again, use a little data form like this. Simple, simple, simple. Keep it very easy. Otherwise, it's going to be just not done. You and I, if we're elaborate, we might have many dreams about doing something or other, but if it's too cumbersome, we lose track, don't we? So if we're simple with our plan and it's concrete as possible, there's more possibility of it indeed being meaningful. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that when somebody else looks at it, it should be meaningful. That's why you're going to be using the legend, and that's why you're going to be using a little key down in the bottom as well. You want the X and the O to mean something, right? So tell an observer of your information that the O means that it didn't occur and the X means that. Otherwise, you can't assume. You don't know. I don't know what the X means until you tell me. So put that needs to be there, Then interval recording, those fast happening dilemmas that you're going to be needing to address. Those things that happen in seconds rather than minutes. This is another direct observation method that you can choose to use. And, there'll be children that engage in things that you're going to need something. You're going to use a method that catches those quick happening things, and this is the one that you'll divide into seconds. So, eyes on paper, the child has his eyes on. So yes, the child, take data on to what extent is the child using that 15 minutes, that 10 minutes, small little block of time that you'll just see the kinds of behaviors that it is that you want. And by the way, we know that isn't just one child. There are 5 children, 4 children, more than that. And there could be a peer. You could do 2, you could do the little child and a peer. But you can set up a real simple little data generation form like this, and you can be, taking note of several different children and keep it really simple. And then at the end, you could see your totals and calculate and graph what you're going to find. So then duration data is a very simple thing to understand, and that's simply how long a child is engaged in something, how long they're doing, the length of time the child is engaged in a task. And then you can calculate the whole length or the average length. You can get 5 days divided by 5 to see an average, or the entire duration. Your choice, do you want the total duration or the average duration? And beautiful to write into Excel that, you have 7 trends, and you'll simply notice what duration of time it takes the child to whatever it is that it might be, and show that to a parent, and it's going to mean a lot more. Again, the other thing is when you're trying to help a parent come to grips with the fact that your little child is having difficulty in school, and they might tell you, oh, that was never told to me before. Maybe giving them something like that helps. Giving them a little graphic display that shows a peer versus your little child. This is what we've got, and that might speak to them. Again, numbers and graphic displays, might indeed help a great deal. Latency recording, this is a fascinating situation when we as parents and as teachers and as itinerant educators and all the roles you play, you see a child and it takes them so long to get their acts together. Have you ever had that? They come into their class and how long does it take them to get them seated down? How long? It can be 5 minutes or 7 minutes, and gosh, the period is over, So that's really difficult. So this thing is latency, shortening the duration of off task. So I told you to begin working, and let's shorten the time. And by the way, go about it in the most positive way you can. Those of you who are seated are all getting 5 points. And 5 points mean I'm going to be in the pizza thing, whatever, at the end of the day or whatever it might be at the end of the week or something. But latency recording has to do with trying to lessen the amount of downtime and the off-task and disorganization and those kinds of things that we might see. Formats, keeping those simple and, designing them to meet your needs. There's nothing to tell you that they shouldn't be, whatever most practical way you can possibly make them. I often think of these things as kind of like those rosters we keep in our checkbooks. They told us to put in the date and the number of the check and the place we wrote it, and then do the calculation. They gave us that format, but it's handy and useful. If we don't like it, you can adjust it. In this case, there's no one and only format, so keep it simple. Is what I would say. So again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Visualizing your data, and we looked at her data there, and so as we think about the kinds of things that you all deal with on a daily basis, and interpreting data, may I hear some thoughts that that kind of come to your minds? What are, obviously it's been a while sitting down here, I know very well, and who knows what kind of weather we have outside and everything else. What most significant thing, during our time together today, what are some of the most significant little pieces of the puzzle that you encountered?
It always feels better just to know that we're all in the same boat. We're all saying the same thing. We all face the same frustrations. The next thing is to get to the next step, to get past those frustrations and get the work done. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's reassuring to gather together to know that, there is no magic wand out there. The kinds of... You keep looking and you keep thinking that somebody has a magic wand. And do you know what? Nobody does. The nice thing to be reassured that the knowledge that you have is the knowledge that's available in the field, and it's a matter of how are we going to creatively use our knowledge
and deal with the complicated and interesting challenges all along the way. You know, you keep looking for a magic wand or a magic solution of some sort. And it's reassuring to gather and think about other, you know, how we can put it together differently or anew or deal with unusual situations. Other thoughts?
I think it's really key that you continue with the multidisciplinary approach and not have one person always having an eye on the situation. Like the different perspectives.
Different perspectives.